Hello students of class 10, welcome back to yet another fabulous session of English only on Classroom TV. Okay, so we're going to deal with The Trees. Now The Trees, it's a poem written by Adrienne Rich. Okay, she's Adrienne Rich. She was born in America, Baltimore, Maryland, America in the year 1929. She's the author of 20 volumes of poetry and has been called a feminist and a radical poet. So most of her poems, guys, they deal with women. Okay, so the themes of her poetry, her poems, they are mostly feministic in nature, and she's a radical poet, she's a strong poet, so her views in her poems are quite vocal and strong. Okay, that's what radical means. Now here, guys, we have a poem called The Trees. Now the trees are not necessarily trees as in trees, but these trees are women. And guys, all of us do know that when a girl is born, when a girl is being raised, when she becomes a woman, she is always told that her place is in the home. Yes? And as long as the girl stays at home, as long as the woman is at home, does domestic work, she's good. She's great. She's fine. And that's how women should be. That is the orthodox belief. And every parent wants that, their daughter is at home safe and sound. But our author here, our poetess here, she's Adrienne Rich and she's a feminist. And therefore, in her poem, she talked about how that every woman, though she is, bound to stay at home, within her is that burning desire to go out, to be free, to enjoy, and to, fill this world with more trees. Okay, so let's try to, understand the poem in a much better way. Because, guys, this poem is a very difficult poem. It'll take, at least 2 or 3 readings for you to understand. So go ahead and read the poem thrice at least to understand this much better. Anyway, can there be a forest without trees? So think about this. Can there be a forest without trees? Now, trees here, I told you already that they symbolize women. Okay, women. Where are the trees in this poem and where do they go? So think about this, guys. When you read the poem, think about where the trees are at first and where they are going. Okay, so the trees here symbolize women. So, can a tree stay in a house? Can a tree be bound in a house, inside a house? Yeah, think about these things. Now, let's read the poem first. The trees inside are moving out into the forest that was empty all these days, where no bird could sit, no insect hide, no sun bury its feet in shadow. The forest that was empty all these nights will be full of trees by morning. All night the roots work to disengage themselves from the cracks in the veranda floor. The leaves strain towards the glass, small twigs stiff with exertion. Long cramped boughs shuffling under the roof like newly discharged patients, half dazed, moving to the clinic doors. I sit inside, doors open to the veranda, writing long letters, in which I scarcely mention the departure of the forest from the house. The night is fresh, the whole moon shines in a sky still open, the smell of leaves and lichen still reaches like a voice into the rooms. My head is full of whispers, which tomorrow will be silent. Listen. The glass is breaking, the trees are stumbling forward into the night. Winds rush to meet them. The moon is broken like a mirror into pieces, flash now in the crown of the tallest oak. Now, this here is our poem, so let's try to understand the poem line by line and of course stanza by stanza. Now here, guys, we have our poetess Adrienne Rich, and she's talking about trees moving out into the forest. So here guys, we have a forest, and this forest does not have any tree, because all the trees are caged inside a house. When a tree is caged inside a house, that is not its place. A tree is supposed to be in the forest. It's supposed to give shelter to different animals. Yes, that's what trees are there for. But here we see that the trees, they are inside a house. The trees inside are moving out into the forest. So there are trees inside the house, and these trees are, what are they doing guys? They want to move out of the house, out into the forest. The women, so trees here are compared to, they symbolize women. So the women, they don't want to stay at home, rather they want to have a change, and they want to go out into the forest. Okay, now, so the trees, now remember that the trees are symbolizing women. So please have this in your mind, otherwise you will not be able to understand, because trees, they don't go out, they cannot walk. Yeah. The forest that was empty. So what was it guys? Till now the forest was empty. Now when you think about a forest, what do you think about? Trees. That's the very first thing that comes to your mind. But here she says that, these trees, there are no trees in the forest, and the women who have been in the house all this while, who have been doing domestic work all this while, they have healed themselves, and they said, well, there need to be a change, and that change is we need to go out. We are ready to move out of our homes and have our homes in the forest here. So they're ready to have a new life, to start a new life. So the trees inside are moving out into the forest that was empty. So all this while, where were all the trees? The trees were all inside the houses. The women were all inside the houses. And because the trees were inside the houses, the forest was empty. And because the forest was empty, what happened? All these days where no bird could sit, there was no shelter. Now trees, they provide shelter. So here guys, we see that there was no bird there. There was no bird, there was no shelter for the birds, so birds did not live in the forest. No insect hide. Where do insects hide? Insects, they hide in the trunks of the trees, the boughs of the trees. They hide everywhere in the trees. And here, because there are no trees, there are no birds, there are no insects. No sun buried its feet in shadow. And then, because there were no trees, the sun rays, what is the feet here guys? Bury its feet. What is its feet? Rays, the sun rays. Usually what happens? When you have the sun rays, they, fall on the trees first, and then they get buried in the trees. Yeah? So, no sun buries its feet in shadow. No sun buries its rays. When you have the sun, when the rays fall on a certain object, what happens? You have shadows. But here there are no shadows because there are no trees, there are no objects over there. There are no birds, there are no insects. So there is, there are no shadows. The forest that was empty all these nights will be full of trees by morning. So nights, night signifies that, it was a time of no joy. Mornings, they signify, that it's time for change. It's time for freshness. So all these days, the trees, they have not walked into the forest. They have stayed at home, and the nights were long, and now it was time for them to move out of the house, and for it to be, and that would be in the morning. And this morning would not be like any other morning, because this morning When the trees are out in the forest, you would have birds, you would have insects, you would have shadows, you would have the sun rays falling and hiding in the shadows. You would have all the, aspects of nature. Yes, so in the very first stanza, we are told about how that these trees, they have, stayed at home, and now they are ready to move out of their homes and go into the forest. Why do they want to go into the forest, guys? To fill the world with mankind, to fill the world with humankind. So now the women are ready to fill the world with this mankind, okay? Now further, she adds that the forest has been empty for many, many days, and now the forest will be repopulated. It'll have many trees, it'll have birds, it'll have insects, okay? It'll give shelter. Women, they give shelter, yeah? And so would these, trees give shelter, and so would these women. The sunlight, it couldn't form shadows, but now the sunlight also will form shadows. Now, all these days, it was emptiness, darkness, but now would be light. It would be a time of morning. It would be a time of joy. Okay, that's what is talked about in our very first stanza. So now let's try to understand our second stanza. All night the roots, they work to disengage themselves from the cracks in the veranda floor. The leaves, they strain toward the glass, small twigs stiff with exertion, and then long cramped boughs shuffling under the roof like newly discharged patients have days moving to the clinic doors. Now all nights the roots, they work to disengage. What does the word disengage mean? To remove themselves. Guys, if you know anything about roots, they are the strongest. Yeah, when it comes to a tree, guys, the roots are the strongest, and it's very, very important for any roots to be strong. If your roots are not strong, the tree will fall. So here, because the roots are so strong, and they have, been at home all this while, it's not so easy for a woman to just go out of the house. Why? Because she's so, fastened to her house. She's fixed to that house. And therefore, for a woman to go out of the house, it is not very easy, because she is planted and she is rooted into the house there, into her home, into the domestic affairs, to take care of the mother, the father, the children, the husband, name that person. Yes. So all these days, what was the woman doing? She was involved in her domestic work. Now what should she do? Now she's ready to move on, right? She's ready to move forward. Therefore, all night, what does she do? Because by morning, where should she be? She wants to be in the forest. So the entire night, what is she doing? She is trying to remove herself from the cracks. So there are many roots over here, and they are, very, very strong, and they are like into the ground. So she's trying to get, release herself. What is happening? She's trying to release herself from all the bonds that she's actually, entangled in right now. A woman, she has so many responsibilities, so many things that she does at home. So right now, what is she doing? She's trying to she's trying to get herself out of this bondage. In the veranda floor, the leaves, they strain towards the glass. So what are the leaves over here doing? There's a window right here. Yes, you can see the window. And what are these leaves doing? These leaves, they want to break this window, and they want to come out of those windows. Why? Because the tree wants to be released. The tree wants to come out of that house. So the leaves, they strain towards the glass. Small twigs are the branches, guys. Small branches, they stiff with exertion. That means even they are trying to move out. So when they push themselves, how do they become? They become very stiff. Stiff means straight and strong, yeah? So these twigs, they become very, very stiff, so that they can break the windows, and so that they can break the house in some way and come out of that house. long cramped boughs shuffling under the roof. So here this tree, you know, it has a lot of boughs, and what are these boughs doing? These boughs are under the roof and they are, you know, cramped under the roof. Imagine if you're, you know, this tall, yeah, you know, however tall you are, and if you are in a room that is of the same height, what happens? You have to bend all the time and walk. Yes, you are, you know, you're in that cramped position. So here a tree is huge, a tree is big, and this big tree is limited, is restricted to the walls of the house. So what happens? The boughs of the tree, they are, in what way, guys? They are cramped. Now, like newly discharged patients, half dazed, moving to the clinic door. So somehow they try to get the root, you know, try to get their roots out of the veranda floor. Then, you know, the leaves also, they break the windows, and they're trying to break the windows, and they're trying to come out. The small twigs also are doing the same thing. We have the boughs, you know, they're all cramped under the roofs, and they're also shuffling, they're also moving as much as they can so that they can come out of this house. Are you able to visualize that? Are you able to visualize how the tree is trying to get itself out of the house? And finally, I'm sure it does. So therefore, how are the trees moving? Like newly discharged patients. So here trees are compared to patients, and how, you know, patients, they are under medicine, you know, under some kind of medicine, and therefore they would not be able to see clearly, especially a person who has been in the hospital for a very long time. So someone who has not seen the sun for a long time, someone who has not, you know, enjoyed fresh air for a long time, who has been in the hospital for a very long time, when they are asked to leave, guys, they want to leave. Okay, they want to be discharged, they want to leave. So like newly patients, they're half dazed, they don't know what is happening, they're confused, they cannot walk properly. So are these trees. Even these trees, they're unable to walk properly, because all this while they were fixed to in a certain room. Yeah, they were, you know, asked to do a certain chore, and they did that certain work, but they didn't go out. So now these women are ready to go out. These women are ready to explore. These women are ready to fill the forest with many more trees. So like half days moving to the clinic door. So now they are at the door. They're slowly trying to move out of the house. I sit inside, open to the veranda, writing long letters in which I scarcely mention the departure of the forest from the house. The night is fresh, the whole moon shines in a sky still open, and then the smell of leaves and lichen still reaches like a voice into the room. So who is this I here? I is Adrienne Rich, our poetess. Our poetess, what is she doing? She's sitting inside and she's writing letters. Now in her letters, in her long letters, so she's taking time to write those letters. In her long letters, she writes about everything and anything, but she does not mention, scarcely mention, that means she does not, or I did not, or I do not. I did not mention the departure of the forest from the house. Yes, and that is how the whole world treats women. We don't want the women to go out. We don't want that change. And then when that change does happen, we don't want to talk about it. Yeah? So here she's writing long letters. She's probably writing letters of great intellect. At the same time, in her letters, she's not talking about the trees that are trying to move out of our house. We have, remember guys, there was a tree there, yeah, that the first and second stanza, what does it talk about? How that the trees, they are disengaging themselves and, you know, from their roots, and they're slowly, you know, walking towards the door. They're at the door right now. So here in her long letters, Adrienne Rich is not talking about it. She's not talking about the departure of the trees from the house. The night is fresh. Now she's describing the scenario there. The night is fresh, beautiful. The whole moon, that is the full moon, shines in the sky, still open, The smell of leaves and lichen still reaches like a voice into the room. So here we see that the night is described, that the moon is described. Now the moon, guys, it's there, it's full moon. And when people can go, people go out, they can see the full moon there. If you have trees, what happens, guys? Your view is objected, yes? You can't see the moon properly. You can probably see half of the moon, or, in some way you can't see it properly. But here you can see that full moon there because there are no trees in that forest. The tree has not yet moved out of the house. It's still trying, guys. The smell of leaves and lichen, what is lichen? Lichen is the smell of algae and fungus that's on the trees, right? So this tree is still in the house, and here the poetess, Adrienne Rich, she's able to smell that. She's able to smell the leaves, she's able to smell lichen, still reaches the voice into the room. So that means she's still able to smell that. The trees are still struggling to go out of the house. My head is full of whispers, which tomorrow will be silent. So she says, yes, right now it's night time, and this night time they're really struggling, and they're almost there. My head is full of whispers. I'm able to hear things. What are whispers, guys? Whispers are, soft noises, soft sounds. And here she's able to listen to the sounds. What are those sounds, guys? The sounds are those of the trees trying to move out of the house, breaking the windows, the roots trying to come out. All these are, different sounds that she was able to hear. My head is full of whispers, which tomorrow will be silent. Tomorrow it will all be silent. Why will it be silent tomorrow? Because by morning tomorrow, there would be trees in the forest. And that is what forests are also, are all about. When you look at forest, if it doesn't have a tree, there is no use of having a forest. Yes or no? Yeah. So my head is full of whispers right now, but tomorrow these whispers will be gone, because these trees that have been in the house, that have been contained and restricted, they will move out. Listen, listen. The glass is breaking. The trees are stumbling forward. So what's happening now? The glass is breaking. So that means the tree is finally, freed. The tree could, break the windows, and finally the tree was able to leave the house. She could hear now she's telling everyone, listen to this. What are you supposed to listen to? Listen to the glass breaking. The trees are stumbling forward. They are walking forward into the night. Winds rush to meet them. So here we do have someone ready to meet them. Yes. Now, when you look at a tree and the tree is very, very still, it is beautiful. But then when you have wind, what happens? The tree keeps moving, and it's too gracious. And here, guys, we see that these winds are ready to say, oh, thank you, trees, for coming. Welcome, welcome, plant yourselves in the forest here. So the winds have they have gone to welcome the trees. Winds rush to meet them. The moon is broken like a mirror into pieces, flash now in the crown of the tallest oak. So oak is a very big, tall tree, huge tree. And now, earlier, guys, in this previous stanza, we could see the full moon. Remember the whole moon? Yeah. In third stanza, we could see that, the author, she could see the full moon. The poetess, she could see the full moon. But now, that full moon is broken. Why? Because of the trees in the forest. She could not get, the complete picture of the full moon, because the moon was broken into pieces like a mirror, like a mirror, and then flashed now in the crown of the tallest tree. So the reflection of the mirror was broken. The reflection of the moon was broken, right? So did you understand now? So there were trees in the, restricted to the house. They were inside the house, and now they're ready to move out of the house to enjoy themselves, to establish themselves, to, fill this forest with more trees. And finally, they do come out of the house, and they have, established themselves, they have planted themselves in the forest. Now let's work on our poetic devices that are used in the poem here. We have these poetic devices used. Now let's look into these poems, into these devices as we move through the stanzas. Now, in the very first stanza, the trees inside are moving out into the forest. So when you read this line, I'm sure most of you could visualize. I'm sure most of you could think about trees moving out, yes? Moving into the forest. So you could visualize it, you could picturize it. So when you can actually picturize something, visualize something, what kind of poetic device is it? Yes, it is imagery. So here the trees inside are moving out into the forest is the use of imagery. Now, the night is fresh, the whole moon shines in a sky still open. So here you can see all those things, you can visualize it, you can, smell it. The night is smell, you can, you have your, you can imagine all these things. The whole moon shines, you can picturize that full moon that is shining in the sky, which is bright open and which is wide open, the sky is wide open. The smell of leaves and lichen, the smell of leaves and lichen still reaches like a voice into the room. So here we have the poetess sitting and she's able to smell. Okay, and you can actually picturize all these things happening, and this here is the use of imagery. Okay, next, let's look at personification. What is personification? When an inanimate object is given, human-like qualities. Yeah, when an object or when a thing or when something that cannot that really doesn't have human qualities is given human qualities. For example, sun bury its feet. Sun bury its feet. Does the sun really have feet? Does the sun really bury its feet? No, that is the use of personification. This inanimate object is given human-like qualities. We people, we bury our feet, we hide our feet, we do something like that, but not the sun. The sun does not have feet, first of all. Then, twigs stiff with exertion. So how did the twigs become? The twigs became very stiff because they are trying so hard to move out. They are putting so much pressure. Exertion is pressure. Twigs stiff. Can twigs really stiffen themselves? No. But here, these twigs are given human-like qualities. Long cramped boughs shuffling under the roof. So here we have boughs, and these boughs, what are they doing? They're trying to move out of the house, so they are shuffling under the roof. But can boughs really shuffle under the roof? No. But here they are given human-like qualities. Therefore, it is personification. Next, enjambment. What is enjambment? Enjambment is where you do not have any commas or full stops used and the thought is running through the lines. Okay, for example, now here you do have a comma, but from days till the morning, all these lines don't have any punctuation mark. So that means the thought is running through all these lines and there is no pause. This here is the use of enjambment. There is no punctuation here, 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 here. The lines are running just like that. Here again, you don't have punctuation marks used. Then here again, you don't have any punctuation mark. Enjambment. Then again, guys, you don't have punctuation marks here, 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 and then whole of here. So, enjambment again. Finally, 1, 2, 3. Where you have thoughts running without a punctuation mark, that is enjambment. Then, anaphora. Anaphora is the repetition of a phrase or a word in a at the beginning of a line. And in our very first line, we have no insect hide, no sunbury. So, no and no, that is the use of anaphora. Now, simile. Simile is where you use words such as like. Okay, so like newly discharged patients. So here trees are compared to patients, newly discharged patients. And here, like a voice into the room, the smell is compared to the voice, like voice. And then finally, like a mirror. So the moon is broken. Moon is compared to a mirror. So that here is the use of simile, wherever you have the words like. Then alliteration is where you have the repetition of consonant sounds, and you have it in the very last stanza. In the third stanza, you have it in the third stanza, guys, and writing long letters, l, sky, still, s. So this here is a use of alliteration. Now let's work on our question and answers. Find in the first stanza 3 things that cannot happen in the treeless forest. What are a few things that cannot happen in a forest that does not have any trees? Yes, can you tell me what they are? Yes, number 1 is you cannot have any bird in the forest. So there are no birds in the forest because there are no trees to sit upon. You don't have any insects to hide in the trees because there are no trees there. And the sun also cannot bury its feet. You do not have sunlight that can actually form shadows. Why? Because there are no trees. So what are the 3 things? That is birds, no birds, and then no insects, no sunlight forming shadows. Okay. What picture do these words create in your mind? Sun bury its feet in shadow. What could the poet mean by the sun's feet? Yes, the sun's feet refer to the sun's rays, the sunlight, the sunlight creates the rays. What happens, guys? The sun rays, they hit the trees, and after which they create shadows of whatever is on the tree, and the trees, all the different kind of shadows are formed because of sunlight. But here, because there are no trees over there, because there is no object on which the light falls, there are no shadows. Next, where are the trees in the poem? Where are the trees in the poem? In the poem, the trees are inside the house. What do their roots, their leaves and their twigs do? The roots, they try to disengage. The leaves, they try to break the window panes. And the twigs, what do? They try to, become so hard and so stiff that they want to break the window panes and somehow go out of the house. What does the poet compare the branches to? The branches are compared to the, patients who are walking around dazed. Okay, and these branches, they have tried to come out of the house. They have tried to break the window panes and somehow come out of the house. How does the poet describe the moon? At the beginning of the third stanza and at its end. At the beginning of the third stanza, the moon is talked about as being full moon. One could see the full moon, the whole moon. And at the end, the moon, it was broken into pieces, like how a mirror is broken into pieces. What causes this change? Well, at the very beginning, there were no trees, so one could see the whole moon, that is the full moon, in the sky that was just wide open like that. But now, because of the trees, that view was obstructed, and therefore, the moon was now broken. What happens to the house when the trees move out of it? The house, the window panes are broken. Okay, so the house, the floor is broken. So many changes happen in the house when these trees, they move out of the house. Windows and floors and doors are broken. Next, why do you think the poet does not mention the departure of the forest from the house in her letters? Could it be that we are often silent about important happenings that are so unexpected that they embarrass us? Think about this again when you answer the set of next set of questions. So here we see that the poetess, she did not mention about the trees moving out of the house. Why? Because when there is a sort of, especially because we are living in a patriarchal society, women leaving the house, we kind of feel embarrassed to talk about it. We feel ashamed to talk about our women leaving our houses to work out, to do something outside, to establish themselves. We don't want women to do that because inside us we have been brought up like that. So when a woman actually goes out of the house, we don't talk about it. And so did this feminist here. So did Adrienne Rich here. She didn't want to talk about the women leaving the house because she was kind of insulted about these women leaving. Yeah, these trees leaving. Yes. Next question. Now that you have read the poem in detail, we can begin to ask what the poem might mean. Here are two suggestions. Can you think of others? Does the poem present a conflict between man and nature? Compare it with a tiger in the zoo. Is the poet suggesting that plants and trees used for interior decoration in cities while trees are cut down are imprisoned and need to break out? So here, guys, we see that in the tiger, remember the poem A Tiger in the Zoo? There we see that a tiger was caged. Okay, there we see that there are a few tigers that are that the tiger was actually supposed to enjoy itself. It was actually supposed to pounce upon people, be aggressive. But here we see that we have caged this wild animal and made it kind of tame. Yeah. So here, is there a conflict between man and nature? Nature wants to be itself, but we people, we human beings, in order to satisfy our own ego, our own selfishness, what do? We cage these wild animals for pleasure, for satisfaction. We talk about, the fact that we need to protect animals. At the same time, we hunt the animals for fun. Okay, so there's always a conflict between man and nature. There's always a conflict. Man wants to, subdue nature, wants to have his, show his dominion over nature by caging animals, which is not right. Another aspect, guys. Now, if you keep that in your mind, now let's think about trees. Now, we people, we cut trees. Deforestation. What is deforestation all about? We cut the trees. We make our forests, we cut all the trees that are in our forests and we build houses over there. Now, at the end of the day, what do? We are hypocrites. So we go out, we get a tree and we plant those trees in the house. But actually, where should the tree be? The tree should be in the forest. But then what do? We humans, we cut the trees and we say we have a tree inside the house. We have a tree in our house. We have plants in our house. We are hypocrites. So there's always this conflict between man and nature. Trees are supposed to be out in the forest. Animals are supposed to be out in the forest. But here, we human beings, we hunt animals and we say we should protect animals and we cage those animals. And we cut our trees down and we say, oh, we need trees, and we plant trees in our houses. Yeah. So that's this conflict that is being talked about here. On the other hand, Adrienne Rich had been known to use trees as a metaphor for human beings. This is a recurrent image in her poetry. What new meanings emerge from the poem if you take its trees to symbolize, to be symbolic of this particular meaning? So here, guys, we see that Adrienne Rich has compared women to trees. Okay, and guys, women are, she did a very beautiful job, because like trees, they, women also are fixed, and they spread their roots into the house, and they establish themselves in their house, and they're not worried about what's happening out of their house. They're not interested, because for them, their main priority is house, their household work, their children, their parents, their everything. So here we see that a woman, she is tied up with different bonds, and she has to be released of these bonds, and she has to enjoy what she has been created for. Trees are created for nature. Trees are created to live in the forest. Yes, in the same way, a woman should not be restricted with all the responsibilities. Rather, she's supposed to be a woman, where she can actually freely enjoy herself. Okay? From your Beehive textbook, compare and contrast it with the poem you've just read. So previous year, guys, you have done on killing a tree, deforestation. Now, this here is again a poem on trees. Now, you have to compare and contrast these two poems. Think about what the trees is talking about. Think about deforestation. Both of them have one theme in common, guys, and that is that trees should be in the forest, right? So, you can compare and contrast the same using your own intellectual capacities. Okay, guys, I hope you enjoyed today's session. Well, I did, guys. So, before we close today's session, let us do a quick recap of what the trees is all about. Now, here, guys, we have a poem written by Adrienne Rich. Adrienne Rich, she's a feminist writer. She's a radical poet. So, most of her ideas, you may not quite agree with it, especially if you're a conservative person. But since she's a radical poet, she has great ideas and she voices those ideas. Not everybody voices their ideas, but here we have a poetess who is ready and who is willing to voice her opinion. In this poem, trees symbolize women. Okay, and trees, they're always fixed, yeah, and these trees, they don't want to stay in the house anymore, because these trees have been in the house for all this while, and these trees are ready to move out. These women are ready to move out. And to move out, what are they doing, guys? They are disengaging themselves from the veranda floor. Their roots are being disengaged, the twigs are trying to come out, the leaves are trying to come out, the boughs are shuffling so that they can move out of the house. Now, in the forest, there is no shelter because there are no trees. No birds have any shelter, insects don't have any shelter, sun rays also, they're just there. Sun rays are falling upon the earth, but there are no shadows because there are no objects. So here the trees are trying to get themselves out. It's night time, but by morning they will be out. Now, the poet is there, she's writing her long letters. She's actually watching all these things happening. She can see that the trees are trying to move out, but she's not going to talk about that. She's not ready to talk about that in her letters. Why? Because she doesn't want to talk about things that embarrass people. Yeah. Now, yeah, so she finds it quite awkward that a woman is trying to leave the house, and therefore she doesn't talk about it in her long letters. In her long letters, she writes about everything, but not about this. She's silent about it. So she can hear, she can smell the, smell leaves and lichens, and she can hear a lot of things happening. Finally, that night, the trees do come out. They are released, okay, and they are out in the forest. And how do we know that they're out in the forest? Because the moon that was actually seen properly, the full moon, was now broken into pieces. That means there were trees that were obstructing the view. Right, guys? So a woman should not be restricted to home alone. She should be ready to, explore and live her life on her own terms. So, guys, I will see you in our next class, and I hope that you enjoyed today's session. But until then, keep watching us always on Classroom TV. Always enjoy life and learning.